and welcome to another livecast in a small panel here at Blockchain Zoo. We have a very nice guest. There is Steven that has a deep knowledge of crypto from the old days, being advising many successful crypto projects. We have Mel that has an inheritance from the parents of technology and finance, and is here based in Bali now with a lot of experience also in the crypto world and blockchain. We have Danny. Danny, he is one of the co-founders of Blockchain Zoo, and been working with me personally since a long time ago. Also with multi-talented graphic designer, developer, and expert in crypto and blockchain. And about myself, I'm Roberto Capodici, and I have started this Blockchain Zoo with a lot of other people. And we're here today to discuss about decentralized application and the adoption of application on blockchain that is going to happen in the next year, maybe not. Let's gonna see the opinion. Steven.
Yes.
What is your thought about the adoption of decentralized application in the next future?
Well, I've been working with a number of companies that have developed hardware and software products for this, but we've come up against a lot of barriers to implementation.
And what kind of problem were met in trying to implement it?
Primarily legal. So there's a lot of issues regarding the use of QR code payments, for example, in Indonesia, which has now been recently been made law, to be able to allow app developers to use QR codes when making payments, whether that's with cryptocurrency or with fiat. But it's also just having hardware devices registered and certified properly, and the technology is still very new, both the software and the hardware. So rolling it out for mass adoption might be a little bit early for a number of companies. So it's still going to take time, and more time than I think that than we thought originally to get this happening. But it is starting to happen.
That's interesting because while in certain countries QR codes are widely used and abused, like in China, for example, or in even Singapore, I see everywhere that people can pay with the QR codes. In fact, you are partially Singaporean, so you can share some experience of the use of decentralized application or payment method that have been implemented also in the United States and Singapore?
Yeah, so it's been interesting to see, not even just from a cryptocurrency standpoint, but from a fintech standpoint and a payments application standpoint. Those have had a lot of growth and adoption lately across Southeast Asia and in the US. But for example, in Southeast Asia, going up to the counter and having more options to pay, such as Grab Pay or GoPay with Gojek and different apps like that. So it's coming into the mainstream to start using digital wallets. But what is interesting is like where does that hit when it comes up against cryptocurrency, and how much is that going to get adopted? And my question is it going to get blown out of the water by these other apps that are really popular already?
It's an interesting point because regulators are the real big block of concrete in front of the evolution of technology. Many times technology could do so many beautiful things, but the law don't allow the implementation of this technology. And it's interesting how, on another hand, trying to follow this path of what is allowed to be done, we create a user interface that actually will not change too much when all the back office aspects change. I see that paying with the QR code is something that you do to pay with the Bitcoin, but also with fiat currency. So I wonder, people are getting trained to use a means of payment or means to confirm transactions. They're going to apply very easily to blockchain and decentralized application, which is a good thing, maybe in the meanwhile. What do you think in terms of a user experience when it comes to use a decentralized application, a blockchain application, and not only in financial terms?
Yeah, so what I heard about QR code and payments, I'd like to say a little thing about it because it's pretty interesting. When, specifically in Indonesia, what's happening is there is a scattering of the offer when it comes to digital payments. So now, because you have so many digital wallets, right? it becomes actually less practical to use digital payment than to use cash payments. And I think if we want to go over, this is one example of why if we want to go towards a more massive adoption of blockchain-based fintech, for instance, we need to first tackle this kind of problems. Because, okay, tomorrow I offer you to be able to pay in a cryptocurrency, but from a user standpoint, what is the value? What is the value proposition? Is this just another wallet that I need to use with the 5 wallets I'm using already, plus the crypto wallet I'm using already? Or is it something that's actually going to enable something in my day-to-day life? That's the first question. And then, if we go beyond actually, if we go beyond fintech, and this is a very interesting field, which is not as debated as fintech right now, and I will say it's a bit of a terra incognita, to be honest. I think there is still quite a long way to go, to be honest, because first off, the general trend, I think, is to go where the money is, and the money, well, if there is no money in fintech, right? But also, when it comes to switching technology, the switching cost for people who are already using some more traditional applications, in terms of time, involvement, knowledge, training, and all that, and onboarding, of course, are sometimes too expensive to actually develop a technology that's going to be ultimately maybe a bit like I used to say, orange juice. You know, when you buy orange juice, it's actually only 10% orange and the rest is sugar, right? Well, now if you want to implement a blockchain-based solution, you're going to need all the sugar. And sometimes the blockchain aspect is going to be only 10% of it. But what do you do with it? How do you justify it? Do you want to ICO it or not? And if you don't, how do you set up your internal economy? Do you even want a token? What platform do you? So there is still quite a way to go.
So interesting point you're raising, Danny. There are two things that we understand now. Regulation, they shape the way we arrive to the objective, and the users, they don't care at the end. Behind there is a decentralized application on blockchain that they want to have a comfort in using what they want to use. And here I think that the two aspects of fintech, which means payment and finance, rather than the use of digital signature and cryptography to guarantee the quality of transaction, can take a little bit of split. As Danny was mentioning before correctly, everybody's talking about fintech because money talks, but underground things are implementing where you have an ID card that are allowed to sign a digital transaction, like many countries are slowly implementing, like Estonia that is offering to everybody around the world. So these two aspects are interesting, and there are also aggregators that come there to ease the process. So you use a single card, but behind it you can have many sources of funds when you make a payment, as well as on the other side, on the merchant side, there can be one machine that has set many different cards to make it easy for the user. I wonder if this same analogy is going to happen also in the aspect of non-fintech. As you had an experience with an aggregator, I can say, in terms of financial payments, do you think that a similar solution can apply also to validate a passport, an ID card, or a medical certificate in one centralized way when behind there is a cryptography to guarantee it?
I think that's where we're going to go, absolutely. Like Danny was saying, it's going to become a real pain in the ass to be using multiple apps for multiple payments. So I have a GoPay app, I have the Grab Pay app, WeChat Pay. They're just going to become annoying for a lot of people to use, except within that walled garden, you know, the ecosystem that they provide. So I think there's going to be space for another provider to come in that will allow people to sign in securely to all of those accounts. However, that's going to require each of those platforms to start moving over to crypto to allow people to have access to their private keys so they can determine when and where, how that money is going to be spent. And in fact, I gave a talk on this to the government of China and the Communist Party a few years back when WeChat Pay came to present their arguments to the government of China for moving WeChat Pay to the blockchain, because they're very worried, at the time, they were very worried about a large hack disrupting their system. And you can imagine they have millions and millions of users with balances on their platform. It could be a complete disaster having a hack happen to a centralized payments app like WeChat or WeChat Pay. So they wanted to move to the blockchain because they felt that would be much more secure. So when more mainstream fintech fiat payment apps start moving towards the blockchain, then we'll see user interfaces start to change to allow multiple apps and platforms to connect through one interface so that you're not bombarded by all of this.
It's a very good point. I do foresee then that there's going to be a little bit of fear missing out if you don't become compatible with this aggregator that are going to offer one channel to interact with the world. But between implementation offered by a single company, let's say there is a company that promotes one particular solution, and what blockchain real spirit is, there is a community effort. When you think there will be merging between these two aspects, or we're gonna lose and create an underground of things that are anonymous or made by the people for the people rather than things made by a company for a solution of their own problem. How do you see the future going in this terms?
Yeah, well, I find it interesting that even a big company like Starbucks, for example, they're trying to solve, like, the big riddle is how are we gonna use cryptocurrency, specifically we've talked about Bitcoin, to buy a cup of coffee, right? And so Starbucks is that coffee provider, and they're actually exploring how they're gonna accept Bitcoin as a payment at their stores for a cup of coffee. And so they're working with BACT and a couple other organizations to push that forward. But the interesting thing is, so they're not even creating their own cryptocurrency, right? They're not creating Starbucks coin. They're actually saying we're gonna accept Bitcoin. However, that again like flips to the other side of the coin, which you mentioned, which is regulation. And so the regulation around spending cryptocurrency in America, for example, is that it's a taxable event. It's a capital gains taxable event every time you buy even a cup of coffee. And so even if the payment channel is open and the merchant is willing to accept it, Americans in their localized jurisdiction are like, I don't want to pay for a cup of coffee with it, because the regulations and the bureaucracy and the paper trail is just so much that it doesn't actually satisfy some people.
And this raises a very interesting point. I noticed that there is being this a new thing. There is a lot of confusion in people's mind, mostly legislators that are not technicians and need to make sense of something they don't understand. Blockchain, per se, is just a technology. It's like to say a database. And is the use of it that may be regulated, but not the product itself. Meaning that with the blockchain I can do something that is okay for regulation. With the blockchain I can do something that is not. Like with the database I can do something that is okay for regulation or not. But I saw in many times the attempt to regulate blockchain per se as an instrument and not as what you produce. Because if I can do loyalty points, do they follow the fact that are crypto, or they follow the law of loyalty points that are managed with a way rather than another? So that's an interesting aspect. And personal experience, I spoke with a big law firm extensively. Thank God I didn't have to pay for them, because this was a very interesting aspect for them to reason. And it's such a gray area that is still open to interpretation. There is no jurisprudence made on it, and it's something that still needs to be explored and regulated. Privacy by encryption, that's one thing that is interesting in cryptography, and blockchain is also there. Validity of digital signature to prove that something has been signed by a person. All the KYC that is behind the technology that keep changing an ID for a use. This is why, if we look at the adoption of the centralized application, which is the thing that we're trying to explore today, in a couple of minutes, or even 1 minute only, which is your view and your estimate in a vision. We're gonna meet again here in a couple of years and see how this went. Decentralized application for services for the people adopt. When is gonna happen?
It's already happening now. I think Blockchain Zoo is already working on projects like this. I'm familiar with others in Indonesia, like Everest.org, which will be bringing in digital identities for payments and access to government services in Indonesia. So I think in 2 years' time, we'll just be looking back on this conversation that we're having now as like, oh yeah, we were just at the beginning of a really big shift.
All right, interesting. What is your opinion?
I think I'm more pessimistic than Steven. I want to be optimistic, but I feel like we have a long way to go. So, you know, maybe 5 to 10 years. And for me, it's hard to define what user adoption really is and for who. You know, like if we say, you know, user adoption of the money use case of using cryptocurrency to pay for things, it's very different than saying user adoption of enterprise systems and businesses integrating that into their system. So it's like a broad landscape, and as you highlighted, it's very multifaceted. So it's hard to pinpoint that answer.
Thank you. Ben.
So what I see is there are two ways to look at it. First, you have now cryptocurrency holders that represent a market which companies are looking to tap into, right? So as Mel said, Starbucks doesn't even make their own coin, they want to receive Bitcoin or something like that. So there's one aspect, and there's one aspect of the adoption of cryptocurrencies, which is one use case for blockchain. Then this, personally, I don't know. There could be something in the next 2-5 years, or someone that has a different vision on what money is, what money should be, who money should belong to, and things could just get completely flipped upside down, right? But then, I think in 2 years' time, we might all be using solutions which are partly based on the blockchain without knowing it. I mean, Walmart is already using it for instance, for provenance, right? And we're none the wiser about it. So, depending on how it's implemented and depending on who's the target, it could be next week as it could be never.
Thank you, Dan. In fact, in a way, everybody play with the CryptoKitties. That was a decentralized application that a lot of people participated into. Another thing is to say, is a decentralized application deployed by the government that is functional to, I don't know, enroll the kids in school, which is another level that we're gonna see probably. I am also a little bit more pessimistic in a longer term. India just legalized cryptocurrency for payment and is in use of these days. So there are in effect different aspects of this technology adoption in the longer term. We're probably gonna discover it as a fact in the next months or years. Just keep following us at Blockchain Zoo, and thank you for watching.